Hey, have you ever had a cool idea for an Adobe extension to use in software like After Effects to unlock new creative abilities, add efficiencies to you or your team's work, or potentially package up that extension and sell it online to make your fortune? In this video, I'll share the secrets to building an Adobe extension yourself using the power of AI to make it quicker and easier than ever. I've used this method for my own plugin, StableMate, which brings stable diffusion to After Effects. More on the release of that later on. Right, let's jump in as I show you the folders, files, apps, and the AI you can use to build your own extension for your design and animation work. Here we go. First of all, we need our idea, a simple UI panel, maybe with a color picker and some buttons so artists can quickly choose a color and import a primitive 3D model and arrange it in 3D space inside of After Effects. Before I show how you can easily use AI to assist in all of your coding, I wanted to quickly go over the core files that we need to create. So an AE extension is actually a CEP panel that runs inside of After Effects. And you're going to need a manifest.xml file, which tells After Effects this is an extension that it should run, and there's going to be various ID numbers and potentially links to some files and other resources. You'll need an index.html file, and much like a website, this is where you can lay out your UI and load other scripts. You'll need a style.css file where you can style the various UI elements, again, much like a website. You'll then need one or multiple JS files, JavaScript files where you can run functions, listen out for button clicks. You'll then most likely need one or multiple JSX files, and this is where you can have functions that act as a bridge between Adobe After Effects and your CEP panel, your JavaScript functions, enabling you to access the name of a composition, select layers, import images, activate different activities within Adobe After Effects. And finally, you're going to need a .debug file, which enables you to output any alerts, messages, so you can check the functionality of your JavaScript files inside of Google Chrome. If we need to test any functions in our JSX files, we can run an alert and actually have a pop-up notification inside of Adobe After Effects. Cool. So in the manifest file, we'll tell it where our index.html file is and where our debug file is. In our index file, we'll tell it where our JavaScript files are. And in our JavaScript file, we'll tell it where the JSX files are and also trigger any functions in the JSX files, as well as receive information which is received in turn from Adobe After Effects. You'll need to create a folder for your extension in the extensions folder in either the location here for Mac or here for Windows. And the name of your folder should start with com. followed by a unique identifier, usually a company or a personal name. Then add another dot and the actual name of your extension. For example, for me, it might be com.aianimation.awesomeextension. You'll then need to add folders in here for your files, so you will always need a CSXS folder in capital letters, which hosts your manifest.xml file. The other files can go in any folder, but here's a typical layout, and you can reference some of these in your manifest.xml file and also in your index.html file. Plus, you might want to add other folders for some saved icons, a temp file, or any other assets you're going to be using within your plugin, which you can add over time. Okay, that's a slightly boring explanation and housekeeping done. Let's jump into using AI and start building some of this code. We then need a piece of software to write our code. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code from Microsoft as it allows for integration with GitHub Copilot, which can massively help and assist in writing your code. Visual Studio Code is free to download and install, whereas GitHub Copilot, there is a free trial and then it rolls into a monthly subscription, currently at $10 per month, plus I think you can get it for free if you are a verified student. I'm going to assume if you're interested in this video, you've probably got enough skills to install Visual Studio Code and set up Copilot as well, as it's pretty straightforward. Before I show the approach I use for coding in this video, I wanted to quickly point out that Stability AI have just released StableCode 3B, which is their coding offering using a large language model which rivals many of the alternatives, and you can run it locally for free. Plus, you can head to Hugging Face to the StableCode Instruct 3B page, head down to here, look at spaces using StableCode, and choose one of these, and you can give it a try yourself before you set it up locally. So I can go in here, write out a prompt requesting the code that you're after, and you can interact with it, press Submit, and it will give you a response with some code to use, and it seems to be doing a very good job at generating JavaScript, Python, and many other languages. So something definitely worth checking out. Now, whilst you could certainly try and create all of your files using Copilot inside of Visual Studio Code, I do find that using another AI to assist in some of the longer coding can be a massive help, particularly with the latest releases of Claude.ai, which are fantastic and are certainly rivaling the likes of ChatGPT. So here I'm using a paid account of Claude.ai, which gives me access to their various models, including Opus, which is their most intelligent, Sonnet, which is a balance, and Haiku, which is their fastest model. So I'm going to use Opus to start with. And I can write out a prompt describing what I'm doing and some key information that I know about my project and my goals. And I've got my prompt, and I'll share a link to this in the video description below. But essentially, I tell it about the After Effects plugin, the extension I'm trying to build, give it a name for my extension, tell it about my company name, and I give it a piece of example code for the debug file to make sure it gets it correct first time. And I tell it to include any advice or include links to any extra code libraries that I might need to include for that 3D import functionality. And lastly, I just give it a little bit of extra direction and press generate. And here we go. First of all, it starts writing out that manifest file, and it moves on to our index file. It writes some basic CSS for our style.css file, and creates that JavaScript file for the button clicking functionality, and creates that JSX file for file importing and setting a color, and it writes out our debug file. And at the end, it's told us to use the csinterface.js library. I'll show where you can download and add that file a little later on. It's worth noting that if you are interested in developing projects like this, and whilst you can certainly use AI to assist in your development, it's worth having some basic knowledge of coding and developing projects, whether it's for an Adobe extension, a plugin, or something online. Plus, of course, if you're excited about the prospect of making cool motion graphics and animation, having a good base understanding of Adobe After Effects can be a great help as well. That's where Skillshare comes in. It's an incredible online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people just like us. Skillshare offers classes across a wide range of topics from graphic design, animation, 3D, coding, and yes, Adobe After Effects. You can polish your skills and discover new techniques to bring your animations to life. Their cool learn by doing approach means that after each class you can create and share a project, which is an excellent way to apply what you've learnt and get feedback from a community of like-minded creatives. I've actually been eyeing a course on Unreal Engine to level up my skills there for future projects, and there's a class on growing a YouTube channel, which, might be handy. Skillshare makes it easy to chart a learning path with their curated class collections, which guide you from beginner to advanced levels at your own pace. And I think this professional techniques one for After Effects looks pretty cool. I'm also very pleased to say that the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can get started today. Many thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and supporting creators like us on our journey to learn and grow. Right, and back to the video where I'm going to copy that first piece of code, the manifest file generated with Claude AI, and then hop into Visual Studio and press New File to get us started. And we want to create our first file, which is this manifest XML. Press Enter, navigate to your CSXS folder, and press Create File. And press Paste and Save, and you can take a quick look. It's got our extension ID, it's using the correct version number for the current version of Adobe After Effects, but you can check that online if you're working in the future. It's linking to our index file, which we're going to save in our client folder, and it's set the type of extension to a panel, given it a name, which we'll see in the Adobe After Effects menu, and it's given it an initial width and height. One thing I noticed it is missing is a reference to our debug file, so we need to add that here. We could go back to Claude AI and have it give us the text, but we can just jump into Copilot here, ask it to add the code, so I load my debug file in the root of my extension and press Enter, and it gives us our results, referencing some of our own code. So you can see there's an additional line here where it's highlighted it with a green comment here. We can copy that and add the code ourselves there and press Save. We can then go through and copy and paste the code from Claude to our various files, but before I do that, I just want to show you something cool within Visual Studio Code. If you go up to File, Open Folder, navigate to where your extensions are, and I've got my new awesome one here. Just choose that folder and press Open. And then with this menu button here, you can access all of your folders and files. So as you add the files here, you can quickly jump to this menu and open any of those which relate to your project. So I can click on my client folder, press a new file, index.html, press Enter, grab the code for that here, jump back and press Paste. And again, very quickly, just to show what's going on here, it's calling a reference to our style.css file, which we'll add in a second. It's got a title text, awesome extension. It's got a file import option, which is a bit different to what I'm actually after, a color picker, and an import button. So we're going to update this later, so it just loads one of our presets, and then it loads a couple of scripts, that CS interface, and it loads our main.js file, which again, we're going to create using the code from Claude. So I'm going to go through and copy and paste to create the various files as discussed earlier. I just wanted to show a very handy feature within Visual Studio that if, for example, in my CSS file, I wanted to add a color to the body, the panel, and also my text, I can just go to one of these lines. So in the body section, create a new line, and in dark gray text, it will give me a recommendation for some code. It's actually prompting for background color. And if I wanted to use that, I could just press Tab and then roll over that color picker and choose the color I want. Alternatively, if it's not prompting anything handy, you could just start typing and it will give you a roll down of potential things that you're looking for. Choose background color, choose any old color, roll over the color picker and choose the color you want. And again, for the text, it's suggesting color white, which is exactly what I want, and then press save. Okay, with that done, before I can test the initial extension in After Effects, we need to install that csinterface.js file as noted by Claude. Head over to GitHub and get the latest version, which is cep.11. Click on that folder and we'll find the CS interface file here. Click on that file and press download. I've then navigated to the client folder within my extension and add the csinterface.js file there. Okay, so I can now load up Adobe After Effects and hopefully see if the extension's working. And then in After Effects, you can actually see the StableMate plugin that I'm developing at the moment with various cool things. But anyway, before I get distracted, go to Window, Extensions, and there's the awesome extension added to our list. Excellent. I'm going to click there and it loads up and we've got that grey background, our awesome extension text title, the little tabs called awesome extension. We have a color picker that's working within the UI, but rather than the button to load a primitive file, it's actually given us this import functionality, which I'm just going to check to see if that actually works. Navigate to this GLB file that I've got to hand, press open. It's just a simple cube. See if it'll actually take in that color and press import. Prompts me to actually create a composition with a text alert. Quick composition, try the button again, and it works. And with the panel, I can actually dock it like any other normal extension. That down. So hopefully this should be my 3D cube. Excellent. It hasn't worked with that color picker. It's just got the default color. But yeah, not bad for a first attempt with the extension. And we can build on here, style this more, and add that functionality that I was originally after. Cool. What we can do is check that that debug feature is working and that I've set up. So if I jump back to Visual Studio and open up the debug file and check the port number. So in our debug file, we set it at port 7002. Jump back into Chrome. And if I type in localhost 7002 and press enter, and it loads successfully. So it's found that debug file. We can click on awesome extension and it loads a preview of our panel and it's got the code for our system here. We can click on console and any error messages actually load here. For some reason it's throwing up an error, so we can investigate that. But yeah, this is a really handy place and you can trigger messages here using a console.log, and Copilot or Claude can help you write those throughout your code to give you useful messages as you debug and improve your extension. The other area where you will want to be able to test your functions is for your JSX files, which can't throw console log files to appear in console. They instead can do alerts, which appear inside Adobe After Effects. So with our import GLB function inside our JSX file, I just drop down the line here, write alert, open bracket, speech mark, and just say tab. And we're going to get a text alert box that's just going to say import GLB called. And we can put a semicolon at the end. Press save, jump back to After Effects, close the extension and reopen it, and that will refresh the code. If I add a GLB file, press import, it runs the function successfully and we get that little text alert. So this can be really handy for just testing your code, adding alerts throughout that JSX file. So when you hit an error, you can do some troubleshooting to find out where the issue is. And of course, you can go through your code and remove any console logs or alerts before you publish your final extension. You can also highlight a line of code and press Command / on a Mac and it will turn it into a comment, and on Windows you press Control / and you can press it again to flip back to being active code. And this can be a good way of enabling or disabling code or simply adding comments like this one here just to help detail what your code actually does. And that can be handy as your code base gets bigger and bigger as you develop. Okay, so now we know this process is working, we can think about improving it and getting it closer to the original goal. So I could go and chat to Copilot here and explain what I want to do and work through and iterate, improving the code and testing. But again, I'm going to jump over to Claude and ask it this detailed prompt And then I've quickly shared my existing code, so my HTML, my JavaScript, and my JSX code, just so it knows what we're working with from the start. And that's where Claude does really well, as it can read an awful lot of data, so you could share much larger data files if needed. And press go. And that's given me some new code which I've copied over to Visual Studio. In my updated HTML file, I've got my color picker, and then I have 3 buttons, one for a cube, a sphere, and a cone. And rather than having text on these buttons, it's actually loading a different icon that represents the different shapes. And this has all been done by Claude, and it's also loading up Font Awesome, which allows us to use this code for our icons. And this is loaded each time someone uses the plugin, and it's going to load up via a CDN to get the library for these icons. When you actually package up a final version of your extension, you may want to save these icons locally and reference them within your folder structure. But for now, this works perfectly well. Okay, and before I test that code, I just want to make my preset GLB files. So I've hopped into Blender, and I can go ahead and make the different models. So a simple cube. I'm going to click on here and make a new material. So we now have a cube with a plain white material. I go File, Export, choose GLB or GLTF, navigate to my newly created GLB folder within my extension, and just call it cube.glb, and press Export. And I'm going to do the same for a sphere and a cone as well. Cool, so that's done. I actually need to go back and take a slightly different approach, as I opened one of those GLB files up in Visual Studio Code, and it's in loads of binary, which will be hard to rewrite, even though the material values are up here. But if I save it as a GLTF file, we get this nice clean formatted code. And you could use the GLB format, you just need to load some other libraries and a loader and all sorts of other stuff. So I've actually gone back and saved a GLTF file for the cube, the cone, and the sphere, and put them in a folder called GLTF. So I'm going to update my code with that in mind. Okay, and after a few iterations and a bit of back and forth with Claude, I now have my updated JS and JSX code. I actually shared the GLTF data with it, so it knows how to interpret the data, so it can target the color values and update that with the color picker values. So in my JS file, we load our CS interface, it gets the extension path, so the route for where our extension is installed, so it can set the directory path for that JSX file as the one in the manifest seemed to be ignored, and then it works out where the GLTF folder is, and then it calls our JSX script with the import GLTF function, and it passes the shape, which we get from the button, which is down here. So it passes that shape, the color value from the color picker, and it passes the directory path to where our GLTFs are stored. So this is all sent to our JSX file. And then in here, there's quite a few things going on now, but we import the file, it receives that information, and then it goes through, it asks us to select a composition, it loads the file, it runs a function to update the color, which is down here, and that finds the color values, and then it saves the GLB data, and that all takes place within this import GLTF function. And I haven't written any of this has all just been back and forth with Claude. So pretty cool. Okay, so jumping back to Adobe After Effects, and I can press Window, Extension, reload the plugin to use the latest version of the code, select my composition, choose a random color, and choose one of our shapes, a cube, a sphere, or a cone. And I've got various alerts that pop up that I've had for bug testings. I can press OK, and it shows me the path that it's going to use to find the cone. It's updating the color to this value, and it brings it in. Press OK. I can do it for a sphere. Make a blue cube. Here we go. So really cool, and we now have these 3D shapes inside of Adobe After Effects. And you could obviously improve that, have more primitives, have other more complex shapes available at the click of a button. Okay, so I've made a few quick changes to my style CSS just to make it look a tiny bit smarter. And then hopping into the JSX file, I can just show off its last tool. If you press Command F or Control F to bring up the search function within Visual Studio, I can type in alert, which will find all of the alerts in my code. Press this little arrow here to drop down, and we can bring up the replace function. I can put // alert, and then each time I press enter, it's going to go through my code and comment out any of those alerts. And press save. And then next time I run it, I won't have those pop-up alerts anymore. Once you're happy with your completed extension, and you might want to package it up so you can share it for free to the creative community or potentially sell it online, you may want to obfuscate your code, which makes it harder for someone to copy your original code. It's not perfect, but it does help. And you can use a tool like Uglify.js or the JavaScript Obfuscator tool, which can change the way your code looks while still maintaining the original functionality. And then once you're ready to package up your tool into a file that can be shared, there are a few options as shown here from ChatGPT. One of them is using a ZXP or UXP installer, and there's one for free available on AE Scripts. You could then consider selling your extension via a platform like AE Scripts, or potentially sell via your own website with some integration via a site like paddle.com, which can organize licensing, payment terms, tax, and things like that for you. All right, and before I give a little preview of StableMate, the AE extension I'm developing, I just want to do a quick recap and wrap up this video. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully it's been helpful. And if you do decide to jump in and develop your own Adobe extension, whether it's for After Effects, Photoshop, Premiere, or one of the other packages, hopefully this video will have been really helpful. And you can lean into using one of these AI tools to assist with your coding. I recommend checking out Stability AI and their new 3B coding model, as you can run it for free locally, and that could be well suited for this if you're doing it as a bit of a side project or you're just trying to learn. Plus, of course, check out Copilot and Claude AI as they're really helpful. And you can go through and use those debug files with your console and your alerts to try and problem solve any issues you might face, and you can post any of those error codes into the AI and have a bit of back and forth and slowly fine-tune your code, as well as learn how to code in the process. All right, here's a little preview of StableMate, and you can sign up for the waitlist over at aianimation.com. Okay, let me try and stumble my way through describing what StableMate is and what it can do. Essentially, it's the front end that enables you to generate stable diffusion images and videos using Comfy UI, which you can install and run locally on your computer or potentially in the cloud once I get all the code connected and working. I can go to the Settings tab and give it the information for my Comfy UI install. I can navigate to where my Comfy UI is installed on my computer, press Open, and that will populate various default settings for my checkpoint models, control net, and where my temporary images are stored. And you can go through and customize any of those if you need to. I can set where my images are saved to. If I press Test Connection, it prompts me to set the URL for Comfy UI. And with Comfy UI installed and running, you'll typically have a URL like this, which you can copy, paste in here. Test connection successfully connected. I can then go to my image tab and set a positive text prompt, and I can cycle through a couple of presets here. I've got one that says CGI cute adventure bear. Let's make that scary adventure bear riding a cyber speed racer through woodland, realism, high detail. Let's just add cinematic. And there's some negative text prompts. Again, there's some presets here, or you can customize it. And you can choose a model that you're going to use for your image generation, and I've got various ones installed on my system. Let's go for Epic Realism to start with. You can set the guidance scale and the number of steps, which is going to vary the overall quality and how long it takes to generate. And I can set the resolution. Let's go for 512 by 288. And the seed number can be locked or unlocked, and it'll increase by 1 after each generation. And I can press Generate. And my button rotates, and we get a little text notification letting us know what's happening. And in the future, I'm going to try and add a little bar that gives us an idea of how far it's got in the generation. And we've got our first image already with a cool looking biker bear. Looks like he's wearing a bit of the leather on a bike. Generate again. Not the highest quality due to my settings here, but let's keep going till we get one we're happy with the composition of. He's cool. So I'm going to lock that seed number, increase the resolution, increase those number of steps, generate again. And it's changed the image, but it is a higher quality. And I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and press the video button here, which moves us over to the video tab and brings that image in straight away. Alternatively, you could upload a custom image, and you can drop down video gen settings and set the resolution, the level of motion, number of frames, things like that. And this is all using stable video. And press Generate. And if you've ever played around with AI video generation via Automatic 1111 or Comfy UI, you'll be familiar with some of these settings and know that getting them just right or tweaking them can have a massive impact on the final output. And this is that video output, so not a ton of motion, but there's a little bit of dirt flying in the background here, so I could probably up those motion settings, maybe increase the subtle motion, play around with the different things and see if we get something a little bit more dynamic. But I'm not going to spend my time on that right now, so if I jump back to my image tab, I want to show one more thing. Over on this hammer button here, I can click this, and there's this UI that I need to tidy up, but I can press this button here, and it will create a character rig composition, which is an open pose character rig, which we can move around and pose our character. Like so, maybe scale it up so we get a nice close-up shot. And we're going to use this image to guide our output. So jumping back to my positive text prompt. If I cycle to my other preset, we've got old male animator with oversized black frame glasses in messy art studio, dynamic lighting, high detail, realism. Leave the negative prompt as it is. And in our model, I'm going to try out the Disney Pixar cartoon style. Let's put those steps back down, make it 512 by 288 again, just to speed it up. Unlock that seed number. And then in the tab here, I can enable control net and choose the appropriate control net. So I've got line art, segment, depth, and open pose. And this is an open pose character rig. So we're going to go for that one. Choose the appropriate composition for that input. And this is the new character rig composition that is created up here. And I'm going to add a style image, which is going to help direct the overall art style. And I've got this image here that I used earlier on in my video. Enable use style image. You can actually also remove the background. So if you've got a character, it will remove the background and save it out with a transparency, which is super handy. And I'm going to press generate. So we should end up with a Pixar style old animator in the pose of our open pose character rig. And there we go. Pretty cool. He looks a little bit creepy. Let's try another one. I like his bold choice of bangle. They're both going for that one. But you get the idea. And I can increase the settings here to get a higher quality image. And here's one where I've used that epic realism model instead. So yeah, there we go. I can just clear that. And so this is StableMate so far. Got lots of things to improve, bug testing to do, and a few other features to add. But it's slowly coming together. All right, thanks very much for watching. You can join the waitlist for StableMate over at aianimation.com/StableMate. And if you haven't already and you're interested in videos around AI and animation, please press like, subscribe, and leave any comments. Cheers.